godswood of the Red Keep had no heart tree to wear a face and look back at him. There were stately elms, an old oak with bark like cracked iron, and a shallow pool that held the moon like a coin. The air smelled of brine from Blackwater Bay and the resin of the pines planted to soothe western lords who did not understand why northerners went to trees for counsel. Eddard Stark stood where the grass dipped toward the water and rested weight on the cane that had become his shadow since Ser Jaime's men cut Jory down and left Ned's leg a map of pain. He listened. He always had, as a boy in Winterfell when wind ran cold fingers along the crenels and his father's voice fell into silence. As a man at Lord Robert's side when laughter drowned out sense. In the godswood of the Red Keep there was little to hear. The cluck of distant doves, the lap of water on stone, the distant murmur of a city that never slept and did not know him. Still he listened, because there were words that lived in quiet, kept there by a dead sister in a room of blood and the smell of crushed blue roses. Promise me, Ned. He had kept the promise, through war and peace, through Robert's loving rage and Catelyn's hurt, through summer snows and the birth of his children. He had kept the secret because Lyanna's hand had been weak and cold and because duty, once taken, was a chain not easily cast off. But now duty had shifted beneath his feet, and it was not only to a sister's ghost he answered. It was to a living realm and a friend he could not save from himself. Secrets had a sound. He could hear this one splitting the realm like river ice in spring. He turned from the pool and limped back to the stone bench. Vayen Poole had laid out a writing board and lamp and a small pot of ink, anticipating him as always. Ned eased down and pulled the blanket tighter about his knee. He sharpened the quill himself, a small stubborn ritual he had never quite let go. He wrote slow, as if each letter were a step through winter drifts. And when he was done he sat for a long while with the letter in his hands, feeling the weight of it. The old gods would not read parchment. Men would. "Tomard," he said at last. The guard came from the shadows, big and silent as a bear. "Wake Will and Harwin. I want this born at once to Dragonstone. Noins, no brotels. If you sleep, sleep in barns and byres with men you trust to die before they talk. If the city closes its gates, you will take a fisher's skiff from the wharves and follow the coast, beaching by day beneath dunes and sailing by night. Do you understand me?" Tomard nodded. "Aye, my lord. If you are taken," Ned said, and then stopped because there were things a lord had to say and things a man could not. "Burn it before they touch you. Use the lamp." Tomard nodded again. "Aye." Ned sealed the letter with gray wax and pressed the direwolf. It went badly against a king's seal, yet even now he had to trust that a friend would remember what had once held them together. Stannis Baratheon was not warm, nor merciful, nor forgiving, but he was not a liar. Ned had learned to set more store by that than laughter. He watched Tomard go and felt the gods would empty around him. The moon in the pool became a shaken coin and broke apart. Somewhere a bird flurried from one branch to another, leaves pattered, and then it was only the slow beating of his heart and the ache in his leg. He remembered Lyanna's dark hair spread on a pillow that was not a pillow and the sheen of sweat on her brow. He remembered the smell of iron and milk and crushed roses. He remembered 3 white cloaks flashing in sun and the way Ser Arthur Dayne moved with dawn in his hands, bright as winter's first light. He remembered a cry that was not a cry of pain. He rose with a hiss, gathered his cane, and went back toward a keep thick with people who would smile at him politely and work at once to kill him. The sea was iron-black beneath Dragonstone that night, a sheet hammered flat and catching sparks of starlight. On the wind there was the breath of the smoking mountain and the faint taste of salt. Stannis Baratheon stood at a high window, jaw clenched, letter in his hand. He had read it twice already. Now he read it again, as if words might arrange themselves into something else if only he applied enough force. The matter of the king's children, Jon Arryn's suspicion, his own. This much he had known or guessed and hated in silence. Ned's letter named them openly and without flourish. Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommen. Issue not of Robert but of Ser Jaime Lannister. Stannis had expected no less from Stark, who bled candor as other men bled wine. Then the turn came, a bend in a river he had assumed ran straight to the sea. I have withheld a truth that belongs to the realm." Ned had written in a hand gone more careful than any memory of Stannis's. "We are not men who love one another, Lord Stannis, but we are men who have loved Robert, and that is why I write." He read the paragraph again, lips moving, eyes flicking. Lyanna, the Tower of Joy, Howland Reed, Kingsguard not where they should have been. A child given a new name and wrapped about with lies to keep him breathing. The law was a thing of proofs. Marks, writs, witnesses living and clean of interest. And Stannis could easily enumerate the ways this could be wind and wish. He also knew Eddard Stark did not make jests of law and lineage. Behind him, candlelight made old stones seem to move like sleeping scales. Maester Cresson dozed by the brazier, thin hands folded over a worn robe, wisps of hair faint as smoke. Davos Seaworth's eyes were open, as always. He seemed to sleep inside his skin while his gaze kept watch. "7 hells," Stannis said, and heard the disgust in his own voice. "How long, how many years, and this?" He made a fist of the letter without meaning to and then smoothed it, as if control could be restored to parchment easier than to a realm. "Lord Eddard is not a man to dress a lie in fine clothes," Davos said. "I saw him once only, Lord, on the Trident years past. He carried himself like a man who knew the weight of what he bore." "Weight is nothing without proof," Stannis said. "A man can feel most certain when he is most wrong. Then we'll find proof," Davos replied. Cresson stirred. "Your Grace," he said with the absent courtesy old men gave to habit, then blinked awake and corrected himself. "Lord Stannis, forgive me. It is late, and the mountain's hum puts the old to sleep." He lifted his head. "Eddard Stark would not burden you with this unless need pressed. He was raised by Lord Arryn. He learned more than swords in the Vale." "Need presses," Stannis said. He looked down at the bay. A galley pulled on her oars like a beetle drilling through dark, the faint drumbeat of the master echoing from the cliff. "I will not carry a bastard's crown for Cersei Lannister's golden whelp. I said so before any of them dared. Now this, if the boy is what Stark says he is, what does the law say he is?" Cresson's voice was very mild. "The law," Stannis said, "says he is nothing until he is proved. If Rhaegar wed the girl, if the boy came of marriage, then by all we fought to tear down, he would have his father's claim before Robert's bastard line or mine. If he is bastard-born, he is wind and air. Cannot crown wind. I can unseat a bastard, though." He turned to Davos. "You claim to find what others cannot. Go to White Harbor. Show Lord Manderley this seal and ask for guides to the neck. I want Howland Reed, if there be such a man, and not only a bog devil tale. If his hull floats, then you will float with it until you find him." Davos's mouth quirked wryly. "I have floated in worse places, Lord. Take only men who can keep their tongues lying still. No banners, no drums. If you are taken, eat the letter. If you are killed, I will have the head of whoever kills you." "You'll not be there to take it," Davos said. But there was an odd warmth to the words, and Stannis found he did not take offense. "I will be at Storm's End," he said. "Renly runs with his pretty friends and says nothing with many words. He will not do, yet I must have the Stormlands whole. And I will send ravens to the lords of the realm with the truth of Cersei's brood. Let them curse me for it. They have cursed me for honesty before. Truth has a way of finding shore," Cresson murmured. The old man's eyes moved to the letter as if it were a child. "If this boy is what Lord Stark says, we will have to decide whether law was the sword we raised or only the banner." Stannis looked at the maester until he had to look away. "Go," he told Davos. "Before the wind turns." White Harbor rose pale from the water like a stone ship anchored in perpetuity. Lanterns strung along quays and masts like a constellation brought low. Davos came in on a low-gray cog with a new name painted over the old and a crew who could row silent and had few teeth to flash. He went up the Merman's stair with the rolled writ of Stannis Baratheon inside his sleeve and the smell of salt and fish clinging to him as if he were still a smuggler and not yet the kind of man lords allowed through doors. Wyman Manderley was a great pale moon in furs, and his laugh seemed warm enough to thaw river ice. He read Stannis' seal with brows raised and did not laugh as he listened. "The North remembers," he said at last, all levity gone. "We remember the price of oaths and the smell of false crowns. But the North keeps its own counsel in its own swamps." He signaled, "You will have guides. They will not carry your letters for you. Do not ask them to. The Crannog men are not hounds." Davos bowed as deep as his stiff knees would let him. "My thanks, my lord." "Keep them," Manderly said, and smiled again, but the mirth never warmed his eyes. "You will need thanks where you go. Take care not to sink. The neck swallows what offends it." He found the neck as promised, a place where land forgot it was land and dreamed it was water. Pines stood knee-deep in black pools, and the reeds whispered, and the sky came down low to brush his hood. Midges bit through wool and leather and left welts like runes on his wrists. Twice the ground took a man to his waist, and clouded water closed over his belt like a mouth. Twice Davos felt the long, patient tug of mud that wanted him for itself. The guides, small men and women who moved like water themselves, did not speak unless they had to. They called the frogs by names and the pools by others, and knew where the bricks of the old king's road still lay under centuries of silt. On a day that had no clear beginning, fog parted to show him a hall not there a heartbeat before, its walls woven of pale wood and living vine on a raft anchored with stones and the roots of a great willow. Its roof was reeds sewn so tight the rain slid off in silver. Children watched him from the branches like squirrels, their faces clever and still. A girl with hair the color of moss and eyes bright as ponds landed lightly on the deck beside him, though he had not heard the approach of her boat. "My father says men who come with letters should be fed," she said. "My name is Mira. This is my brother Jojen." The boy who came behind her walked as if his bones remembered something his muscles did not. His eyes were old in a young face. "You have crossed a great deal of water to bring a fire into the fog," he observed. "Come. He will see you." Howland Reed was not a big man, nor armored in anything grander than patience. Yet when he took Stannis' writ and read it, the hall seemed to settle about him like a mailed shirt. He asked no questions until he had poured Davos a bowl of a hot, bitter soup that woke the mouth and lit a heat in the chest. "I was there," he said at last, lifting his eyes. "My Lord Stark and I went to retrieve a sister and found a tower and 3 white cloaks. The swords were much and the words were few. There was a bed and a berth and a promise. Lyanna Stark asked her brother for silence with her last breath. I helped swaddle the child. I saw the seal rigor pressed into the cloth. No, I do not have it. I left it when we left the tower because a child does not need another man's tokens to live." His mouth tightened briefly. "I saw a septon's knot that had been cut with a dagger to bind the cloth and keep it from falling. There were words spoken over Lyanna in a place of prayer before ever she lay in blood. Words that bind stronger than iron. If you tell me it was not a marriage because no fool in a rich robe sat in a marble hall to say so, I will tell you the old gods watched as well as the new. But you are a man of ports and parchments. You will want something your southrons will take in hand. I will want what will stand on a dais where men come hungry for lies," Davos said. "Forgive me. I say what my lord will say. He needs to know what he can prove with law." Howland's mouth softened. "He can prove a birth in blood, a dying girl's plea, 3 kings' men sworn and dead where they had no business to be. He can prove his own honor and mine, if such still holds coin in the south." "It does not," Davos said gently. Something in the Crannogman's eyes grew flinty. "Then bring me to the man who still believes it should." Lord Eddard Stark saw what I saw. If he says the words I cannot in a hall of his peers, there are those who may yet listen. "Come with me," Davos urged. "It is a long road, and a dangerous one." "Long roads measure a man," said Howland Reed. "Jojen, fetch our spears." A castle black the wind had a knife in it. Jon Snow stood on the yard with his breath steaming and his fingers numbing around the blunted practice sword. Ser Alliser Thorne paced like a crow worrying the edge of a cornfield. Under, you oaf." Thorne's voice cut like the wind. "You plan to hack the giants of legend at the collarbone? Move your feet, the feet, Snow, not just your shoulders. Jon moved his feet. He had done so for days and would for days more. It was a rhythm now, a way to keep from thinking too long about Winterfell and words unspoken. He had a wolf and a wall and the mutter of men who had never known a father's hall. It would have to be enough. That night in Maester Aemon's cell, the old man's candle made a small island of light. The window was open an inch to let in the cold. Aemon said he slept easier when his lungs had something to fight. Ghost lay in the shadow of the bed and lifted his head when Jon entered, then set it down again as if satisfied with what he sensed. "You sent for me," Jon said. "I did," Aemon replied. His eyes were clouded milk, but they seemed to look through the boy more clearly than most men's clear sight. "A raven has come, and it carried no seed, only salt. From Winterfell?" Hope leapt and fell all at once because he had learned hope had sharp teeth. "From Dragonstone, from a man who lives by rules the wind does not bend." Aemon cocked his head. "He asks that the boy called Jon Snow be allowed to hear a certain matter and be told he may choose whether to carry a burden or set it down." Jon went very still. "What matter?" "The matter of names," Aemon said. "It is a high matter, a dangerous one. Those who move pieces on boards often forget the men under their fingers are warm." He folded his hands. "I cannot tell you all of it. I can tell you this. You are asked to ride south under escort and hear the words of a man your father trusts, and then choose." "Choose?" Jon's throat went dry. "I have chosen. The Night's Watch is a choice fully made only when the oath is spoken," Aemon said, and the kindness in his voice hurt worse than severity. "I do not counsel you to leave. I counsel you to know and then choose what to do with knowing. A man who chooses blindly may still fall on his feet, but not often. And when he falls, he breaks others as well." Jeor Mormont listened with a scowl and then nodded once. "Go," he said. "Hear what these Southron lords want. Bring me back the truth, not their words. If you take your oath after, you will know what you are giving up." He snorted. "If you do not return, I will send men to bring you back by your ears." Jon swallowed. "Yes, Lord Commander." He slept badly and dreamed of Winterfell's godswood, the red leaves whispering and the heart tree bleeding slow. In the morning he saddled a rangy bay and rode out with a ranger named Malador and two men with faces like old leather. Ghost loped beside them, pale as frost, and when the wall dwindled behind them it felt like watching a door close on something that might have been home if you had given it enough time. King Robert died on a hot day that tasted like old wine and flies. When the king's litter returned it was bound in black and Cersei's face was a mask that looked carved and heavy. Ned Stark took the king's last written words to the council chamber and named Stannis Baratheon as Lord Protector of the realm until the king's heir came of age. He spoke evenly and looked no man in the eye longer than courtesy demanded. Varys caught his glance once only, and in the eunuch's gaze there was a glimmer that could have been pity and could have been warning. Peter Baelish touched his silver mockingbird pin and smiled the way men smile when they are counting. Renly Baratheon did not come to council. Through the gnats of rumor that hatch when a kingdom sweats, Ned could hear only the slow, deliberate hum of something heavy moving. He did not see the teeth beneath. That night he went again to the Godswood. The city behind him seethed like soup. The oars of pleasure barges beat out songs on the water, and he could hear shouted laughter from one of Littlefinger's brothels far below. Yet here there was an illusion of coolness. He knelt without a face to look down on him, and for a moment his knee forgot its pain. "Old gods," he said softly, "I have held to what I swore. If I have erred, let it be for a child. Yet I am done with silence. If truth is a knife, then let it be clean." When he left the grove, two of his men shadowed him like darker shades. By the time he reached his chambers, Sansa had left 3 sewing needles on his table beside a length of wrong-colored silk, and Arya had left muddy prints drying on the tiles. He never had the chance to tell them what he meant to do the next day. The City Watch wore gold cloaks and carried their loyalty like a mirror. They showed it to the last man who looked. When Cersei came to the throne room with her son and a paper Ned had to pretend was a will, The gold cloaks turned and he saw Littlefinger's eyes in the crowd and knew exactly how far a mockingbird could fly with one wing dipped in grease. He heard men shouting his name, men he had paid, and men shouting a different name. And then the world tilted and he was falling, cane skittering, knee screaming, someone's boot a starburst of pain against bone. He remembered the taste of iron and the smell of old dust, which was the black cells, and after that he measured time by the scrape of a rat he could not see and the drip that visited at intervals not tied to day and night. Varys visited once, twice, a handful of times. He brought thin broth and news that stuck like fish bones in the throat. "The boy is vicious," he said, in a voice like feathers rustling. "The mother is a garden with no winter. Facing such things, one learns to love mud. Lord Stark, your letter reached Dragonstone. There is a stir in the Stormlands like thunder far away." "Stannis," Ned said. The word hurt something in his chest he had not noticed until it moved. "And the other letter?" Varys's eyes sharpened. "You risk much for one truth. Have you ever considered risking as much for a lie?" "Not much for either," Ned said. "Only a life and a realm." Varys tilted his head. "Lords talk like that on banners. Very well. The Onion Knight is in the neck. He has a frog on one shoulder and a prophecy on the other. He makes little sound for a man with such company." "Davos," Ned breathed. "A man who can make himself small when he wishes," Varys murmured. "Useful in a city built to flatter bigness." He began to count again the day the dripping changed pitch. In a cell, even the language of water was worth learning. He lay on the straw and shaped Arya's name with his tongue and said Sansa's name in his head because to speak it felt like marring something clean. He thought of Winterfell and it came to him with new detail. The shape of a crack in the third step below the dais, the way light found a seam in the shutters of his solar each morning, the creak of a chain in the kitchen when a heavy pot was lifted. Memory was a punishment and a bomb both. The first he knew of rescue was a sound that did not belong to the black cells. A faint tick, metallic, like someone trying to teach an ant how to cut wire. The door stayed dark. Then something slid through the slot where food came, something small and hooked and tied to a delicate thread. Ned sat up and felt his heart move in his chest like a bird. "If you shout, we will have to kill you," a voice whispered from somewhere that seemed made of stone. "We do not want to kill you. Put the hook through the hole near the hinge and pull." He did. The thread was strong enough to hold the weight of panic. The hinge pin came up like a tooth too long in the gum. Another followed. The door did not swing but shuddered, and then hands were at the bottom, brown and deft, and the slab of wood lifted and moved not into the corridor but up, as if the world itself were a box you could pry open. A man slid into the cell on his belly as a welcome snake might and then rose into a crouch. He smelled of wet earth and river weed. His face was narrow and his eyes set in the way of men who see far in dim light. "Howland," Ned said, stupid with relief. "My lord," the crannogman answered, and for a moment they were two men standing on a hill both of them had left years before. Then the moment passed and another man came in after him, broader-shouldered, bearded, with fingers cut short and the look of a man who had been poor and was not ashamed of it. "Davos Seaworth," he said under his breath. "If you can walk, we go now. If you cannot, we go still. It will only hurt more." Ned stood. He hurt already enough for 100 men. "Sansa," he said. "Arya." The crannogman's eyes moved. "A small one with a dancing master is already beyond our reach and perhaps does not need us. The other is caged in the queen's nest. We took a man to fetch too, my lord, but the city breathes around her and will wake. Come. If you do not leave now, you will lose the chance to save either later." Ned did not ask who later might be. He let the men lead him into a slit behind the wall that smelled of mildew and old pea. He crouched and found he could almost move without touching the wound in his leg. A child with bare feet moved ahead of them through darkness as if it had watched walls all its life. Ned followed the whisper of its saws and the steady scratch of Davos's breath. He had thought once that courage was the thing that made you lift a shield. He learned that night it was sometimes only the stubbornness to put one foot before another when both feet had arguments to make against it. They came up into night behind a stack of fish barrels. The smell of rot backed into a corner. A woman's voice laughed nearby, high and bright as glass. They were shadows, and Davos had the shape of shadow about him. He drew them along the quay with a hand on Ned's arm that seemed to know when the ground would heave before it did. It was a simple boat they took, the sort fishermen used to bring their wives bread, and the oars made the sound of a man whispering secrets when they bit the water. No horns sounded behind them. When the black gave way to gray and the gray to something like morning, a galley rose from the sea with the battered magnificence of a warhorse grown old and still proud. When Ned was hauled aboard, there was a moment when the deck rose to meet him too fast. He tasted salt and closed his eyes and saw Lyanna's last smile and the crown of blue winter roses under Rhaegar's hands. When he opened them, a bald old man in a faded maester's chain was standing with tears on his face. "Lord Stark," Maester Cresson said, "praise be, and not to the Seven alone. I had begun to fear our message had been mislaid in some divine jest." "Maester," Ned managed, "I know jests less cruel." He turned, found Howland Reed's hand, and gripped it. "You have returned me a debt I cannot reckon." "You have one more to pay," the Crannogman murmured. "We owe it to her." Dragonstone was smoke and dark stone and sea salt ground into every joint. Stannis was a burnished draft piece on a board he had carved himself, and when Ned was led into the chamber that passed for a throne room, the Lord of Dragonstone did not come down to meet him. He stood and watched, and when Ned stood before him, Stannis said, "You are a stubborn fool." And then, as if the words were a gate that had to be pushed, he came down 2 steps and offered his hand like a man who did not quite remember how such things were done. "I am alive," Ned said, because his mind had not yet caught up with the new arithmetic of the world. "Not for lack of enemies," Stannis replied. "We will address that." His gaze flicked to Howland. "You are the Bogman. I am the man who watched your king's white cloaks strip white from themselves," Howland said without bowing. Stannis's mouth made a shape that might have been respect. "Good. I am beset by courtiers who dance beneath masks. I prefer men whose faces are cut like stone." He gestured. "Come. We will hear this whole and decide whether the realm is stone or water." They sat in a room shaped by the mountain's whim, its ceiling domed and painted with faded dragons. The table was plain. Stannis had little use for the carved behemoth Aegon had left. Davos stood at the wall like a pillar. Maester Cresson had a hand near his mouth, as if to catch something that might fall out if he did not guard it. Ned told the story he had told no one. He told it plain, without embroidery, and when his voice faltered, he did not wait for it to return any stronger. He simply made words with it until it held together. Howland Reed followed, weaving image into fact. He drew a picture of a pale tower in a red land, 3 white figures at its foot, and a bed of blood. He spoke the name Lyanna as if it were a kind of weather. When he had done, Stannis did not speak at once. He turned the seal in his fingers as if it were a coin and he were weighing whether to accept it. "Marriage," he said at last. "Not in a sept with 7 walls, not in a court with every lord to witness, but beneath a tree, with only gods you cannot see to hear." Ned's voice came harsher than he intended. "You will tell me the old gods do not hear as clearly as men who buy their robes with wine? I will tell you that courts love a paper more than a whisper," Stannis said, not unkindly. "But I have this, your word, the Crannogman's, the sight of the king's guards where they had no warrant to be, a dying plea to keep a child from a sword. The day I name a child false for lack of clerks is the day I bake myself into one of the queen's pies." He looked down and then up. "If it is true, the boy is the elder son of the Mad King. He has the strongest claim in any reckoning that counts steel and blood. The realm will choke on it." Ned felt the fatigue of years in his bones and, beneath it, a slow warmth that could have been fear or something like hope. "Jon," he said softly. "He is called Jon. It is a good name." Stannis's glance moved like the needle of a compass. "He is at the wall?" "He is riding south to hear what must be said before he swears an oath he cannot take in good faith," Ned said. "He will be told the truth. What he does with it will be his first act as a man." He is a boy. He is what we have, Ned said, and in his throat there was the rasp of a man whose prayer had been heard and might turn him inside out. He is also what Lyanna asked me to keep. I will not cast him on a fire to make war burn brighter. Stannis made a sound. You think me a man to cast children on flames? You are not wrong about me often, Stark. Do not begin now. If the boy will not take a crown, he may still be a banner. If he will take it, then law is satisfied. Either way, I do not wrong him any more than the truth itself does. Creston's voice came small and precise. There is the other matter, he said. Renly, the Kingslayer's kin in the city, the Riverlands alight. Even if the realm accepts the boy, it will not do so all at once. Lannister gold will buy many objections, and Tyrell Rose's hide thorns grown long. Renly can swell his chest all he likes, Stannis said flatly. He is younger, and law is not a cloak one can borrow because it suits. Law is not all, Cresson murmured. Bread is something, and smiles are another. Renly has both. He can make men forget how hard winter is. You have neither. I say this not to wound. I have watched you since you were a boy scowling at a kite that would not climb without wind. Davos cleared his throat quietly. If I may, a man like me knows where candles gutter when the shutters are left unlatched. If we bring the boy Jon to a place where the North and the River Lords can see him and hear the Crannogman and Lord Stark speak, we can give them something they can hold in their hearts even if law does not sit in their hand. Maybe we do not say king. Maybe we say rightful. Those who hate Lannister may cleave to that. Those who love Stark will not leave a Stark son, or what they will think a Stark son, deserted. And we send word north and south both that there is a greater cold than Tywin Lannister's shade. If we are wrong about that, we lose only face. If we are right, we have done the only work that matters. Stannis stared at the Onion Knight as if the man had struck him and he had to decide whether the blow hurt less than it should. You talk sense more often than your hands suggest, he said at last. Very well. We gather at Storm's End. Let the lords come who will. We will show them the boy if he be worth showing, and the truth, and if they spit it back we will see what steel teaches. And we will write to Lady Stark at Riverrun. She loves her husband enough to hate me if I lie and love me if I do not. Perhaps she will bring her son to heal. She will bring her heart and leave nothing of it unscoured, Ned said, thinking of Catelyn's face when he had said the word bastard, and knowing he must learn another face when he said the word son. He closed his eyes briefly. I will write. The river rode south wore a fringe of willows that trailed their hair in the water, and the frogs sang as if they alone knew how to keep their throats warm. Jon rode with Mallador and the others through mornings that came quickly and evenings that came like hands easing a cloak about his shoulders. He could not stop feeling as if he had stepped wrong and found himself on a different stone. He thought of Robb in Winterfell with their father away, of Bran climbing where he ought not, of Arya's scuffed knees and Sansa's perfect stitches, of Rickon's fat fists in the bread trencher. He thought of a woman whose face he did not know and whose name men flinched from when they remembered how she had died. At an inn where the chickens roost on rafters and the ale was more honest than most, a rider in Stannis' livery found him as if by scent. The man had papers that smelled of old smoke and sea. Jon broke the seal with fingers that did not feel entirely like his. Lord Eddard Stark, in the hand he had known since he knew anything. You are asked to come to Storm's End. There is truth there I would have you hear before you choose how to live with it. There were more words, but Jon could not make them hold still long enough to read in a way that felt like reading. He folded the paper and slid it into his jerkin and went outside to stand beneath a sky that was too open and too high. Ghost brushed his leg. Jon's hand found the wolf's head on its own, as it always did, and felt the press of bone and the slight damp at the ears where the night had left its kiss. Do you know already? He asked the wolf softly. Ghost's red eyes regarded him with the calm of winter. I think you knew before I did. He tried to laugh and found he could not. Storm's End rose from the coast like a story told by a man who wants to scare children into eating. It was a fist clamped around itself, the walls thrown up in shapes the sea could not easily name, and the wind went round it as a dog goes round a stubborn ram. Jon saw it from the last slope of land and felt the hair on his arms lift in the salt breath. The gate swallowed him. The yard held tense more than usual, banners not entirely obedient to the same breeze. There were trout and river wheels and crossed long axes and a blue and white merman and a crannock spear woven from reeds and... His breath caught, a gray dire wolf on white that snapped and fell and rose again. He found Robb there in the shadow of the keep, taller by inches and slimmer by a boy's starvation to be a man. For a moment they stopped at one another, and then the moment was gone, and Robb's grin split his face and they were banging shoulders in the way boys do when they are trying not to be boys. "You came," Robb said. "I was asked," Jon replied. He could not stop looking over Robb's shoulder. The man behind the direwolf standard was their father. Eddard Stark had lines he had not had when Jon left Winterfell, lines that had been drawn in a place with no light. He came forward and put his hand on Jon's shoulder, and Jon felt his heart crack like thin ice under an unwatched sun. For a breath he was a boy again, a boy who wanted only to hear, "Well done, Jon, or it will be all right." Then something else moved beneath the cracking, something he had brought back from the wall. "My son," Ned said, and the words were heavy enough that Jon had to resist the urge to reach and help carry them. They went inside, where wind became soundless and stone made a small privacy of space. Catelyn Stark was there, and the sight of her face was like feeling an old scar pull. She looked at him as at a cold room in her own house, and Jon stood the way men stand when they know the cold will not leave for a while. "Lady Stark," he said. She inclined her head. Her mouth was a line that might cut. "Jon." There were others. Maester Cresson with his chain and sadness. Davos Seaworth, whose eyes were kind and cautious both. Howland Reed, whose presence seemed to draw green into the room, though there was no green here. Stannis Baratheon, who looked at Jon as if he were a nail and Stannis a hammer deciding whether to strike. And behind them all, the sound of a fortress remembering sieges. "I will say this plain," Ned said, "because this cannot be dressed in anything that will make it softer. My sister Lyanna died in Dorne in a tower after Hall of the Kingsguard had fled the field. She died in blood. She had a son. She gave him to me and I gave him a name. I could not give him the name that came to him with his father, because the world would have killed him for it. I have wronged you," he said to Catelyn without turning his head, so the words fell between them like a thing neither would touch. "By letting you think another sin. Forgive me if you can. If you cannot, I will bear it. Jon, I took a promise from a dying girl and made it into a life. You are that life." He told the story not as Howland had told it to Stannis, with images hung like charms, but as men speak when they think anything more would spoil something worthy. Jon stood still and the room moved around him. A tower, a bed, 3 men in white, and a man who was not his father standing over him with a sword in his hand and a lie on his lips to keep him breathing. He felt ghost at his knee and did not remember the wolf entering the room. "Who was my father?" Jon heard himself ask, and his voice did not sound like it belonged in his own mouth. "Prince Rhaegar Targaryen," Ned said, and his eyes were on Jon's face as if the boy's skin might change with the news. "Your mother named you for the man she had married. I named you for a man I loved as my brother, because that was the name that would keep you alive." The room breathed for him when he could not. He expected anger to come, the way the wind comes over the wall sometimes when you are foolish enough to stand out of cover. Instead, there was a slow settling, like snow that has been falling all day and only now begins to find its proper places to lie. "I am not your son," he said, and hated the sound of that almost as much as he found relief in it. "And I am. You are mine by my will, if not by my seed," Ned said. His mouth made a shape that could have been a smile and was not. "I will not lose you either way." Catelyn stood as if each word were a stone set on her belly. "He is a Targaryen," she said softly. "You have put dragons in our house." "I have kept a promise," Ned said, and in his voice there was something that might have been a plea and might have been an axe striking. "If you cannot forgive, then hate me for the right reason." Robb had not moved from Jon's side. He lifted his chin as he had when he was 7 and insisted on riding with the men to see the whites at Molestown that Maester Lewin swore did not exist. "He is my brother," Robb said. "He will be that whether his hair burns or not." Stannis chose then to speak. "You will have a choice," he told Jon. "You were sent for to hear the truth and then choose. If you want the wall and the black, I will not stop you. It would be folly, but I have no writ to take a man's oath from his mouth. If you want law, you have it here. You are who you are by right of birth if we can get the realm to recall what right means. There will be blood either way." Jon looked at the man. "Why do you care?" Stannis blinked as if no one had ever thought to ask him that. "Because I am tired of watching people eat the bread they stole and call it a feast. Because there are rules or there is nothing." He glanced briefly toward the shuttered window, where the wind rattled a loose latch. "Because there is a cold coming down from the north that does not care how you feel about it, and it would be a novelty to face such a thing with more than thieves and pretty words." Jon felt a laugh that was not laughter. "You talk like the Lord Commander," he said, and thought of Jeor Mormont's scarred hands and the way he would lift his mug as if it weighed more than iron. "Maester Aemon told me once that men think crowns ease their heads. He said they are closer to yokes." "That old man has more sense than most cities," Stannis said. Davos shifted. "It may be there is a way to make fewer enemies all at once," he said carefully, as if picking his way through a net. "We need not crown anyone today. We call a council of such lords as will come, north and river and storm, and we show them the truth. We ask them to pledge not to the boy but to the realm, and to accept Lord Stannis as protector until such time as a proper ascent is made. Those who hate lions will join for the joy of it. Those who love Stark will come because he asks. Those who fear winter will come because they think we have fire. Yuwa, and Timi to be a banner and a secret both," Jon said. "I want you to live long enough to decide what you want to be," Davos replied simply. "There is Renly," Cresson reminded them. "He holds half the Stormlands by charm and promise. He will not like a council he did not summon." "Renly can be answered," Stannis said. He looked at Ned. "Will you stand with me if I stand for the realm and not only for my own name?" Ned's gaze rested a long moment on his wife, then on the boy who was and was not his son, and finally on the Onion Knight who seemed to be the only man in the room not wearing a weight he could not shrug. "I will stand where truth stands," he said. Storm's End filled and filled again. The yard became a market of banners. Karstark sunbursts glared from spear points. Tall heart pines shook as if in some wind that did not touch any other cloth. Manderly's merman opened his mouth at a field kitchen to ask for more stew. The river lords came as they could. Malisters with silver eagles, Fry with a forest of twins on gray, blackwood ravens that made boys throw stones at their own shadows. Not all. Some wrote prettily to say they could not quit their duties. Some sent sons whose mouths had down still on them. Some sent silence, which could be interpreted as courage or cowardice at leisure. Renly came in green and gold with a Tyrell garden at his back. He had a smile that made women look twice and men suspect themselves of sourness. Mace Tyrell waddled beside him like a prize boar. Ser Loras came on a white charger with silver petals sewn into the hackamore. His hair like a dark spill. His eyes far away from where he actually was, the way young men's eyes go when they mistake imagining for memory. They parleyed in a hall that had been stripped of courtesy and made into a council chamber. Renly laughed before the door had even been closed. "Brother," he said to Stannis, "from the humors of this assembly one would think the gods meant to ride you like a mule to the Red Keep." "I do not answer to gods that wear roses," Stannis said. Renly looked to Ned. "And you, Lord Stark? I was sorry to hear of your misfortunes. I would have helped you if you had chosen to use the men you had when they were useful." "I am alive," Ned said. "I instruct my children to be grateful for such small mercies." Renly's smile faltered and then found itself. "We are very serious today." "Very well. What is this council?" "Mace has gone to great trouble to supply food for an army, so I hope you will not send them away hungry." Stannis did not sit. "The Queen's children are not the king's by seed. That you knew and fled to your friends when you could not stomach acting on it. Renly tilted his head. I favor action. I merely favor useful action. There is more, Ned said. There is a child who lives owed a name and a place. I will not throw his life to the worms of your humor. Hear Howland read. Howland spoke. He did not speak long. Renly did not laugh while he spoke. When the Crannogman finished, there was a silence the shape of a knife. Renly's smile returned like a standard being re-erected after a gust. A pretty story, he said. I am moved, truly. Perhaps we should all go into the swamps and sit under a willow and see if the old gods drift down to say they agree. Mace Tyrell chuckled dutifully. Stannis's mouth flattened. Ned said nothing. Davos's eyes moved from face to face like a man measuring a net's mesh. The law, said Stannis, names the boy the heir if he is what these two say. You will not like the sound of it. The realm may not. That is not my concern. I am protector by the king's will and the hand's petition. I will do what law demands. What law demands? Renly spread his hands. Law demanded Robert, and Robert took. Law demanded that the last Targaryen die, and you chased Viserys into far places and left him to sell his sister for a crown. Now you would drag back another, one from the wall, who does not want your iron toy for his head. Be honest. This is a cudgel to bloody the lions with. It is a good cudgel. I am not offended, but do not expect me to kiss it. You will accept a counsel then? Ned asked quietly. One in which Stannis holds the realm against the lions and the boy is kept safe until those who must hear have heard? Renly's eyes flicked past Ned to Catelyn and back. He had always had a knack for seeing where pain sat in a room and knowing how to speak into it. Lady Stark, he said, you would have me bend my knee to a black-clad boy who has not even sworn his black yet? Do you like the taste of that? Will your son? Catelyn's hands were folded tightly at her waist, white at the knuckles. I like the taste of truth, she said, and her voice was low. And I like the thought of my daughters alive. Renly's shrug was a musician's when the tune he prefers is asked for again. Then pledge your truth to me. I will bring you your daughters and show the boy Southrons how to smile while they accept their medicine. Stannis will make them choke on it and call it a cure. I will not pledge to a younger brother while his elder lives and has a better claim, Catelyn said. I have lived in a south where men thought sweet words could rule. The trident taught me different. The look Renly gave her then had something hard under its silk. He flicked it away in the next heartbeat and turned back to Stannis. Your counsel will be a feast of words and a famine of swords, he said lightly. What will you do when lions come to the gates and the cooks have only syllables to put in the pot? Fight, Stannis said simply. Renly sighed. Of course. He looked again at Jon, who had stood at the room's edge, lost in the shapes of men arguing over his name as if he were not there. And you, Snowcrow? Will you perch on my shoulder and whisper how virtuous I am when I turn up my mouth? I am not yours to perch, Jon said, hearing his own voice as if from a distance. I am not anyone's yet. You are very solemn, Renly observed. It will sell well. People love the somber when they are young and have not learned how it sours the tongue. He bowed, not mocking, not quite. Brothers, he said, to Ned and Stannis both, as if he could make the word hold by saying it. We will see which way the wind blows. The Tyrell gardens are not easily uprooted. We will not camp here to wilt. If lions come, send word. We like sports. When he had left with his colors and his perfumes and his promise of an army withheld at ease, the room seemed to become a different sort of place. The air was thicker and the light less suspicious. They will not come, Stannis said. They will wait to see me bleed and then ask whether I meant to spill any. Then let us not bleed at a place of their choosing, Ned answered. Tywin Lannister has taken Harrenhal. He will not come to Storm's End with that carcass to feast on. We should move north and east and stitch together what we can of the river's bank. And the city? Cresson asked. The city will eat its own as it always does, Stannis said. When it is hungry enough, it will open its gates to the first pot of stew it believes is not poisoned. We will make sure that is ours. Jon stood in the yard that evening while the wind worried the banners and Robb showed him how to tie a new knot he had learned for the fastening of cloak to mail. He could feel eyes follow him, Karstark men, as if he were a ghost of the old lord's son. Manderley squires, as if he were a story their grandfathers had told. Riverlord's boys who had never seen the wall and thought the black was something men wore when they meant to be tragic. Catelyn Stark passed through the yard with 2 of her father's men. She paused beside him, her mouth pressed and opened as if she were tasting a thing. "If I have wronged you by my anger," she said without looking at him, "then consider that I have found new cause today. It will take me time to hate you less truly and hate your father more rightly. I do not know what else to do." "I do not ask you to love me," Jon said. "No," she said, "you do not. Perhaps that is something you share with the man who fathered you." He let her words pass like wind-carving drifts. She broke away and then turned back. "He looks at you as if you are a son he misplaced and found with dust on you," she said, and her eyes were wet and hard both. "Try to remember he had to misplace you to keep you breathing. I will try to remember it too." "I will remember," Jon said. That night he dreamed of a tower with no door and a wolf scratching at its base. He woke with a start and found Ghost's head across his ankles, heavy and real. He went out to the parapet and looked at the sea's restless skin. Stannis Baratheon was already there, a shape carved out of dark. "You cannot sleep," Stannis said, as if the observation were a charge. "I can," Jon said. "It's just loud in there." He gestured toward the keep and something beyond it. Stannis's mouth twitched. "The noise of men's wants. It is a sound that does not sweeten with age." He was silent a moment. "Do you want it?" Jon did not ask what it was. "No," he said, "but I do not yet know if not wanting is the same as not taking." "That is honest," Stannis said. "Many young men think wanting and deserving are cousins. They are strangers. If you take it, it must be because law asks and because it spares the realm more ruin than it invites. If you do not, I will find a way to beat these lions back without a mask to frighten them. Either will be hard. The North cares for its own and mistrusts what burns. The Riverlords hate and forget in cycles. The Stormlands are mine. But men who fear me are not always men who fight their best for me." He glanced sidelong. "You do not like me. That is well. I do not like me, but I will not sell the realm to purchase my reflection a kinder mirror. That is the best I can offer." "Maester Aemon said a crown is a thing that crushes," Jon said. "It is iron," Stannis replied. "Iron crushes. It also holds up bridges." Jon thought about bridges until he could think of walls again. "There are things north of the wall," he said abruptly. "Things the old stories do not make big enough. I do not know if the realm could be made to believe it even if a corpse walked into this yard and bowed. But I know it, and the Lord Commander knows it, and Maester Aemon knows it." He looked out at the Black Sea. "Sometimes I think men love their fights because they know how to fight, and the fights they do not know make them want to drink and sleep." Stannis's breath smoked and vanished. "Then perhaps we should teach them a new fight before the old ones finish them." He was not a man given to softness, but when he spoke again his voice had something almost like gentleness chipped into it. "Do not be too eager to throw yourself on the nearest pyre to warm others. If you choose the black, choose it because you love it and know what it costs. If you choose the crown, choose it because you hate it and know what it costs. It will not matter which if you lie to yourself." Before dawn, a rider came spattered with mud and fear. Tywin Lannister had moved from Harrenhal, teeth bared. Ser Gregor lit the Riverlands and rode with the kind of hunger that left only black crumbs. Tyrion Lannister had been seen riding to King's Landing with a train of sellswords and a bag of tricks and wildfire in his head. The city's granaries were counted and found lacking more in trust than in grain. "We cannot be in 3 places," Stannis said tensely. "We will cut the lion's whiskers first. The Riverlords cannot be left to gnaw their own fingers wondering if their overlord fights for them. Stark, take your son and whatever Northmen can be spared for speed. You will go to Riverrun and cinch the knots that have been slipping since your fall. Manderley, Keep the road to White Harbor free for grain. I will send Davos to the city to sniff the wind. I will come after with the Stormlands and show the mountain what a mountain is. You send me away from the council when it is to be made, Ned said. I send you where your face makes men settle, Stannis said, and there was nothing like insult in it. When the council meets, it will need you less than they do today. I am not skilled at making men love what must be done. You are better at it than you know. Ned left Storm's End under a sky the color of forged steel. Robb rode at his side with the eagerness of boys who think the first cut will be clean. Catelyn rode behind with her father's men, and under her cloak the small needle and thread she had always carried pricked her through the cloth like a conscience. Jon watched them go with Ghost's head at his hip, a feeling like a hand closing about his chest. He could have gone with them, back to a river road with willows and a keep with round towers and the smell of rain in the stone. He felt the choice then, a weight he had been carrying since the Godswood at King's Landing and had not named. He went instead to Stannis and said, "Send me to the city." Stannis stared at him. "You are a banner as much as a boy," he said bluntly. "Men will speak of you more than they should if you make yourself common beside them." "Banners do not stop arrows," Jon answered. "I will go as a man. If there is wildfire to be lit and old tunnels to be walked, I have done worse in the dark. I would see it. If I am to choose a thing that might pull the realm's eyes, I would like to look once into the eyes of what we mean to keep." "You want to see the rot," Stannis said. "Good. Men who cannot smell it mistake perfume for health." He nodded curtly. "Go with Davos. Wear a cloak without device. Let no man call you by any name at all inside those walls. If the city cannot hold itself, we will let it empty of confidence and fill it when we are ready." The black-sailed galley cut the water under a moon sliced down to a paring. Davos stood with his hands loose on the rail, salt drying in the hairs of his beard, his eyes on the slow rotation of the harbor beacon. Jon stood beside him and tried to read in the water what the city would do. He smelled tar and river and something sweet that came and went and made his stomach turn. "The city always smells like that," Davos said, reading his flinch. "Sweet with rot and smoke with something under it. Men call it spice when they sell it." He glanced sidelong. "You did not answer Lord Stannis. Do you want it?" Jon let the sea answer for a moment. "I want to do the thing that is most useful. I do not yet know which thing that is." Davos nodded, satisfied. "The right trouble to have," he said. They came in by night with lights hooded. Varys's men made the city open like a mouth if you knew which tooth to touch. The red keep loomed above them, the windows orange and then dead. The shadow of the Tower of the Hand, a dark finger across the sky where no hand lived anymore. The streets breathed warm on them. Davos moved like a man sliding along a wall he had painted himself, and Jon kept pace and kept quiet. He saw Sansa Stark once only, from a distance, her hair like a red flag at a balcony while crossbowmen drilled to kill the air. He saw Tyrion Lannister standing with a stick of a man in a black robe and a woman whose eyes were green and empty. The dwarf's mouth moved as if he were eating words to see how they tasted, and the others laughed in different languages. He felt the city's fear like a fever that had not yet broken, and he thought of Maester Aemon and his thin hands folded like birds at rest. At final light on the second day, as bells rang like false promises, Jon stood on the city wall and looked out at the glitter of the bay. He could see the skeletons of old fires along the shore. Davos came to stand beside him, the Onion Knight's mouth a grim line. "They will fill the bay with green fire if they can," Davos said softly. "They will bake the sea and call it a victory. When winter comes, no one will have wood for their ovens," Jon said. Davos glanced at him. "You talk like an old man sometimes." "I feel older today," Jon said. "Good," Davos said again, as if it were a blessing. When they slipped out, the city did not notice. Cities are too much themselves to notice anything until it sits down on their chest. On the galley, Jon looked back at a sprawl of light that could have been a camp, a wound, or a market, depending on who gazed and why. He made his choice on the third day after they returned to Storm's End. He went to the yard and found Stannis beating a practice post as if it belonged to a particular idea. "I will take the black," Jon said. Stannis turned. "You will run from your name?" "I will hold to the one I chose," Jon answered calmly. "I will do it knowing what I leave. That is better than doing it blind." He drew breath. "I will be a bridge. There are kings nearer than Winter who will fight to cross. I will show them how to get north and live and fight what comes. When you beat the lions and the roses into a single march instead of two pretty courts, send them to the wall. Bring bread and men and smiths who can mend iron and make it sharper. Bring boys who can become men without becoming monsters. Bring your law." He met Stannis's eyes and did not drop them. "Give me that, and I will give you a realm that will not fall into the sea when the ice pushes down." Stannis stared at him for a very long time. "You make it sound easy," he said at last, like a compliment made of a sneer and respect in equal parts. "It is not," Jon said. "Nothing is. You will wear a name whether you want it or not," Stannis said. "It will be spoken quietly if you go north. It will be spoken loudly if you stay. Either way, it will be a trouble to you." He nodded once. "Go. Take with you men I can spare who will not drink your wine and steal your horses. Take Davos when I can shift him. Take letters with seals enough to make petty kings feel important when they arrive at a pile of ice." He lifted his chin and his mouth thinned into something like a line of iron. "I will give you the realm's promise. That seldom buys a loaf, but it can buy the oven." Ned listened when Jon told him, and if there was a movement in his face, it was one only a man who had watched winter settle would notice. He put his hand on Jon's head, a father's gesture he had always been careful with and therefore always wrenching. "I am proud of you," he said simply, "in a way that hurts." "It hurts me too," Jon said, and they laughed a little, because the other choice was not to breathe. Catelyn came upon them after and stood a moment looking at their shapes. "I am trying," she said to Jon, the words slow as if she had to lift each with a spoon. "If you do this, you do it because you are your father's son whether or not he seated you. I will pray for you. That may not be a comfort." "It is," Jon said, and found it was true. He rode from Storm's End with Mallador and 2 new rangers and ghosts dancing in the saltgrass. Robb walked him to the gate and punched him in the shoulder hard enough to make a bruise remind him through nights ahead. "Do not die," Robb said. "I will try not to," Jon replied. "You do it first. I want to copy your work." Robb grinned and then did not, and then hugged him quick and hard as if the yard were a battlefield and he could steal a moment from it. "You're my brother," he said, because he was stubborn and wanted the world to take dictation. "I am," Jon answered. The road north was long and full of men who thought Southron politics a kind of weather to curse and sit out. Jon watched small things. A boy carrying his father's pack because the father's knee hurt and he was ashamed. A woman bar, tearing the last of her summer turnips for a hair ribbon she did not need but wanted because winter made vanity a form of hope. A smith pounding bent iron straight and saying to no one in particular, "It's always bent. You just keep hitting it till it looks like you meant it that way." He thought of crowns and laws and promises like ovens and bridges. He thought of ice. Behind him, Storm's End emptied into the river roads and the march along the Mander, banners like leaves blown before a storm. Stannis moved with the understanding that what one cannot outlaugh one can outlast. Ned bound river lords with words that remembered and promised and asked. Renly waited and counted and told jokes to mask calculations. In King's Landing, wildfire bloomed green in the minds of clever men, and Cersei Lannister polished her mask and leaned near Joffrey's ear to drip words like snakes. On a day in the middle of nowhere with the light slanting in a way that made everything seem as if it were agreeing with itself, Jon turned in his saddle to look south. There was nothing there his eye could catch, only distance, and the thought of men he loved moving like pieces he had set aside unwillingly for a larger game. He felt the pull of 2 names, both his and neither. He rested a hand on Ghost's skull, and the wolf leaned into it with a weight that said the world was still a thing you could touch. He faced north again and rode on toward a wall of ice that held the sky like an oath. At the next edge, Mira and Jojen met him as if they had been drawn out of the green by the thought of him. Mira smiled in the quick way people who are good with snares smile. Jojen's gaze was elsewhere and here at once. "You chose," Jojen said. "I did." Jon looked at the boy. "Do you dream it ends well?" Jojen's mouth twisted, not unkindly. "I dream it ends," he said, "and then begins again. But in one of the endings, there is a bridge made of men. It holds." "That will do," Jon said. They took the last miles together, and when the wall rose before them, the size of it pulled the words out of Jon's mouth. Ghost sat and looked at it with the serenity of things born for winter. Malidor grunted. The rangers with him made signs against ill luck and then pretended they had not. Jeor Mormont came down to the yard to meet him with his bare's shoulders and his expression that said he would give a man as much rope as the man wished and then watch how he used it. "Well," he said, "heard you went to see the mummers show and did not like the puppets." "I liked the strings less," Jon said. "Good," Mormont said. "Strings get a man killed if he trips on them." He glanced at the wolf and at Jon's face and the rangers who were with him. "Ready to swear?" Jon looked up at the wall. He thought of vows and names and rings of cold iron. He thought of a council that would meet with or without him and a king that was not a boy and a boy that was not a king. He thought of his father's hand and a tower and a bed and a promise. "Yes," he said, "now I am." They swore before the heart tree that had never been cut. The old gods listened as they always did, with the kind of patience that outlives empires. When Jon spoke the words, he felt the shape of them in his bones, as if they had been waiting there for a place to fit. "I am the sword in the darkness. I am the watcher on the walls." The words did not feel like chains. They felt like work waiting. That night, Maester Aemon sent for him. The old man's hands were thinner than before and warmer. "You have chosen," Aemon said unnecessarily. "I have," Jon answered. "Men will ask why you have refused to be a king," Aemon said with small humor. "Men who have never refused a second cup of wine." Jon smiled, then sobered. "If they ask, tell them I chose to be a bridge." Aemon nodded. "Bridges bear much," he said. "They break under more. You will need men to walk you lightly." "I have some," Jon said, and found he believed it. "And others are coming." Aemon's blind eyes turned toward the cold window. "I feel the weight of men moving. A storm in the south that will break and leave the air smelling new. Winter in the north that does not care." He tilted his head. "When you are asked again to choose, you will choose the same." "I will," Jon said, because he could feel the shape of the next choice already, and it fit the one he had made. He moved through the days after that with a steadiness he had not found before. He learned the new names and the old habits, the feel of cold that settled not only on skin but in the breath as it entered and left. He walked the wall at dawn and felt the world stretch under him like a skin drawn tight over bone. He drilled with men who had been thieves and farmers and second sons, and he learned which of them could be made into something that would hold when winter put its shoulder to them. Letters came north with the ravens. Stannis' seal and Ned's hand, each in their way a form of iron. The city had cracked itself and the pieces were grinding. The river had bitten the lion's leg and would not let go. Renly had charmed 1,000 men and angered one god too many. Tyrell and Lannister were sniffing one another like cats across a fence. Through it ran the sober thread of Davos's observations, practical as bread. "We will come when we can. Build your ovens. Keep the men who make arrows from taking wives they cannot feed. Do not let the smiths drink. We will bring charcoal. We will bring men who have seen more than their own yard." In Winterfell's gods would the wind rasp leaves the color of blood. Far to the south, in a hall built to look like a forest and fail, a queen sharpened a lie and handed it to a boy who thought it a toy. In a tent near Bitterbridge, a shadow glanced across a wall and did not linger. A choice was deferred by an accident of attention. In Riverrun, Honor sat with grief and counted grain. On a night when the aurora walked above the wall like a banner stitched by strange hands, Jon stood with Ghost while frost made lace of his breath. He thought of dragons and wolves, of fires you tended in the belly and those you tended outside, of promises to sisters and promises to realms. He thought of bridges and ovens and the stubborn work of iron. He set his hand on the cold stone and felt the ice speak the only word it knew, the one that did not change because men did hold. He nodded to the cold and to the wolf and to the old gods that watched without moving their carved eyes. Then he turned and went to wake the men whose turn it was to stand and to sleep, the men who would one day look south and see an army coming not to take their crowns but to learn how not to die.